Congressman Ogles, welcome to Freedom Talk. It's really good to have you.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been in the desert, so to come home to Tennessee and have this cool 80-degree weather compared to 115 plus the heat index, it was like I got out this morning and walked the dog and I was like, oh, I love Tennessee. God bless America.
Yeah, absolutely. And I lived in Arizona for 5 years, been out there a lot. Very different here. The humidity is amazing. And I'm sitting here looking out at the Murray County Courthouse right behind you, where Jason Aldean filmed Try That in a Small Town.
That's right.
And this is your home base. This is your district, and we're glad to be here. Can you tell us a little bit about what you experienced at the border? You're fresh with a tan and going down there in 500-degree heat, I think, something like that.
It felt like it.
Yeah.
It was. Obviously, I'm a border hawk. I'm one of those that has been advocating for closing the border, just hard stop, close the border, no amnesty. But when you go down and see it, and you see the millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars of fence, and you'll be driving along the border, from the processing station, you're heading east. You'll have a quarter to half mile of fence. It's impressive structure, and then they've cut out a section. Mm. And then you go another quarter to half mile and they've cut out another section. And those sections that they're cutting out are in strategic areas where it's easiest to cross into the country. So it's not like this is done for maintenance or they open the fence in hard to get to areas so that they can, on the other side of the wall, there's a little, in most areas, you could get a small piece of machinery to backfill dirt or rock or whatever, which makes sense. Along the border wall, they have gates that they can close and lock. But that being said, this is intentional. And so we were out on patrol. We did it during the day. We encountered folks during the day in the blistering heat, and then at night as well. So I was down there with some special forces guys. We had night vision, thermal drone that we could put up in the air, and we were watching their cartel. And there's a big difference, too, in the way they operate. And so we were in a section that is not largely patrolled. And the folks that are wanting to come to America readily just turn themselves in, and they see you. So we pop over a ridge, and we see bodies or individuals, and they start walking towards the vehicle. And next thing you know, other folks start coming and migrating towards the vehicle, and we call it in. And at the end of the day, that group, once we assembled the 3 pods, we're right at 77. And then earlier in the day, we had found a group in a very remote area from Guatemala. They're out of water, a bunch of young children. Had we not found them, you can only assume, but it likely would have been catastrophic for some of those kids.
Yeah, I know from experience, because I've been out in that heat plenty of times. You run out of water, it's just a matter of time. I mean, you dehydrate so quickly out there. Have you heard any rationale? I know down in that area around Sierra Vista, Tucson, some jaguars cross over the border from time to time. I've heard some people say, well, if we have the fences, they won't get through. Have you heard any justification for taking, I think we know why they've done it, but why have they taken that fence out in those areas?
Well, I mean, it's clearly access. And so there was, I don't know if it was Kamala or Biden or one of the officials made comment that they had removed a section of fence so the antelope could cross. And so we went to that section of fence, and there's just a couple of strands of barbed wire. So, whether I was supposed to or not, I went under the barbed wire into Mexico. I'm a country boy. I know how to track deer. And all I could find were footprints from humans, water bottles and trash, and the cartel will use horseback, and then there was horse scat or poop, and so the only things or creatures using that particular opening that was for deer were humans. Right. And so again, this administration is they're complicit in allowing this country to be invaded. I made videos along the journey documenting it so people could see it for themselves, unfiltered. And, every rape, every murder, every death, burglary, assault that takes place at the hands of an illegal, this administration is guilty. They are complicit. They're aiding and abetting. And if you're a victim, you should be angry. And that regardless of being a Republican or a Democrat or independent, literally, in just a course of, in one evening, here I am a congressman. Border Patrol is nowhere to be found. We encountered over 100 individuals in just a short section of the wall.
Yeah. Wow. The Epic Times put out a documentary recently. It's called The Gotaways. And I wrote some of the content for that. I'm a contributor. The the premise behind it is that for everybody we see crossing, for everyone we capture, detain, there is a much larger number who are the gotaways. They just fade into the U.S. They go to cities. And one of the points made from that documentary was that every state is a border state because they don't stick around necessarily the border areas. They'll end up here in Tennessee. How much of a concern is that to you? Do you feel like Tennessee's a border state in a sense?
Oh, it's huge. And again, having been there, the cartel, I mean, it's a very sophisticated operation. And so they'll use bodies, the Border Patrol is understaffed. And so what they'll do is, and because there's so many holes along the fence, they'll push large numbers of family units to a particular area to overwhelm the Border Patrol. And then what they'll do is start moving other assets through other sections of the wall. And so we literally witnessed, we had the thermal drone up in the air and you could see the folks moving across and with the more remote areas, and they'll wear what are referred to as carpet shoes. And so these are individuals that don't want to be tracked. And so they'll put literally, it's a homemade sandal carpet on one side, typically camo on top, and they're wearing fatigues, camouflage. And so they're moving fentanyl, they're moving guns, they're moving other whatever, and it's very intentional. So at one point we were in this remote area during the day, and I crossed over. I climbed down about a 30-foot bluff to what you could tell was an encampment just on the other side, and just over the ridge to my east, about 100 yards on the other ridge, there was cartel stationed. They were armed, and then one of them crossed over the ridge that overlooking where I was, had a spotter monitoring me while I was down in the encampment, just taking photographs and looking around. But they literally have on the hilltops on both sides, mind you, on both sides of the border, monitoring activity, whether it's contractors. When I say contractors, you could be operators who are assisting the government. It could also be contractors in the sense of folks who are working on the border wall repairs and such and that kind of thing. And then, of course, Border Patrol. And it's a very sophisticated operation. And until you see it in action, you don't really appreciate how again, I've said it multiple times now, but how sophisticated the operation is on moving bodies. And keep in mind is when they're pushing bodies across, women and children and teenagers, they're getting a price per head. So they're making money there. Now, it's not as much of a profit center as that backpack full of fentanyl or meth or whatever that just came across on the other opening in the fence. But they're making tons of money. And we came across, and so there's one main road going into this area towards the processing station, and there was a Border Patrol station, so they can monitor people coming in and out. So are you carrying cash back into Mexico to cross illegally back in? There was nobody there. So I literally took photographs of one of these places that they're supposed to be monitoring, and it was empty. It was a ghost town. Now, they had cameras everywhere. And so the very next day when we came back through, it was well manned because they saw a congressman with a shirt.
I was just going to ask,
they realized, oh, wow. And we saw that too after they realized who I was and I was on the border documenting it. Suddenly, the very next day, there were lots of personnel actually monitoring. But again, this is the state of the country, and this admission. And I want to be careful here. The agents on the ground are good people. They love their country. They're there for the right reasons. But when you start going up the command chain, this is coming down from the top. When I mean top, I mean Mayorkas, and they're telling these folks to stand down, and they have no choice. They're following orders.
Sure, I know a number of people in Border Patrol, a number of agents, and privately, they've told me the same thing. And I know they're frustrated. I know some of them are frustrated with some of the leadership because they see and understand what's going on. They just don't know what to do about it. And I'm talking about Border Patrol agents who love their country, who are patriotic, and they see what's happening, but they're having their hands tied. Actually, I'm going to have on Art Del Cueto pretty soon. He's I want to say it's the Border Patrol Foundation. He's the head of that. And he's got a podcast. He's constantly talking about the Border Patrol. Maybe a good person to introduce to you at some point, but I've also been out in the desert and seen areas where there are shoes and backpacks and undergarments. They talk about the rape trees.
Mm-hmm.
You probably heard about that. Some of these coyotes that bring people over, they have like these trophy trees on how many women they've raped. So there's also this humanitarian crisis going on. And I see some people of certain political persuasions thinking it's terrible that we have a wall, but we're really trying to prevent some very heinous things that happen at the border, because we do care about people, whether or not they're U.S. citizens. What did you hear about some of those things?
Well, I documented it actually. So, and one of the encampments, so just across the border there in Mexico, went down into one of the encampments, and there was towels and blankets where they had bedded down for the day, and then they crossed at dusk or dawn, and literally found a pack of birth controls pills.
And you showed me that earlier.
Yeah. And so took a photograph, but typically what'll happen is some of these young women will take birth control so that they don't get impregnated along their journey, and then either this woman who had this dropped it, or she was at the border and she was safe, and so she just left it behind because she didn't want to take it anymore. Don't know, I'm only speculating. In another situation where we encountered the folks from Guatemala that were in that very remote area, there was a woman's blouse that had, it was actually a very nice blouse that had been left behind right next to a campfire. And again, I can only speculate, but my guess is that was not left behind voluntarily, that she was forced to remove it, and the coyote left it there and was going to come back and get it as a trophy.
Is it hyperbole to say that this is an invasion of our southern border?
Oh, it's absolutely an invasion. There's really no other way to describe it. When you see the sheer numbers of people that are coming in and how freely they move. So again, that group, there would have been two pods. The Guatemalans that we encountered that had been left, but there was another group that had recently passed through because their fire was still smoldering and the blouse was there. And when we put it was getting dark, and when we put the drone up, we could tell that there were folks on the U.S. side that were hiding a few hundred yards in, and likely coyotes waiting to cross back over. But again, it's when you think of a sovereign nation or a world power, the part of the definition of that is going to be a strong military, secure, safe border, and open and fair elections. And depending on how you define the specific of those metrics, we don't check all three of those boxes, and some might argue we don't check any of those boxes anymore, and that's a problem for this country. And then you kind of transition to, you look at the whether you like Trump or not, the sheer persecution of they're trying to destroy this man because they don't want him back in office again. When you look back in history, and when you look at world powers, Rome or the British Empire, and conflicts of politics are being settled by jail time versus the ballot box, that signals the end of that empire. Yeah. And so I think we have a twofold wake up here, canaries in the coal mine, of that you now have a justice system that's two-tiered, that if the machine doesn't like you, or if you are outspoken and rock the boat, they're going to try to destroy you and ruin you or put you in jail. Meanwhile, we're being invaded because to some, this is a constituency that gives them power. And we're at a pivotal time in our history where the republic rises and we become stronger, or we buckle and fall to our knees.
Yeah, you beat me to the punch. I was just going to transition to this very topic. What's happening today reminds me very much of ancient Rome. Marius and Sulla having their rival gangs, Caesar and Pompey. It devolves it into, or degrades into, an environment where, of course, these people, even back then, they were sophisticated. They tried to keep appearances, but they were brutal toward one another. They were brutal toward the other party. It's very concerning. And you combine that with what you said about the border and other tactics that are just chipping away at our republic.
That's right.
Not to digress, but we know that the Chinese Communist Party, these things are part of their strategy of unrestricted warfare. And I know you and I have talked about that before. Tell me more about these Trump indictments, the indictments of people surrounding him. What's going on there? Because I read an article by Steve Lance from NTD and the Epic Times. And you had some very interesting things to say about that.
Well, I mean, again, this is when you have the weaponization of the government, you've got this district attorney that is literally following orders. Newt Gingrich, just in the last 48 hours, has come forward to say that he has a good source that is literally saying that she was on order to indict, and she was forced to rush the indictments because they were trying to kind of hit the media cycle, right? Because that's what they wanted in the news. And so you literally now have someone coming forward to say that those indictments were political in nature. The case itself is flimsy and a stretch at best. And look, you and I have a right to disagree, and you have a right to not believe that an election was fair or that maybe there was cheating. It doesn't make you guilty of treason. And so Donald Trump had the right to pursue and make sure that in these states where they had changed the dates of voting, where they had allowed mass numbers of ballots and ballot drop boxes, that it's okay to question that process. It's a free country, right? We're a republic of free states. And the fact that now they're trying to prosecute him, I'll make a prediction. Donald Trump's going to be the nominee. And if Biden is the Democrat nominee, Trump's going to win, and he's going to win handily. And I think there's some of these states that they're fed up. They see what's happening. And so I think there's a large number of independents that, again, may not like Trump for whatever reason, but at the end of the day will end up vote Republican because they see a country in crisis. And you go back to COVID. I mean, you saw the weaponization of government, and where government exerted more authority than I would argue it constitutionally had. And now you're seeing the mumblings of kind of new COVID protocols using this fear of the next virus, the next thing. And so I would caution, and I would urge people to not comply, quite frankly. During COVID, I refused to comply. There may be consequences for making that decision, but at the end of the day, this is a free country. We're a free republic, and we must preserve and fight for that even to our last breath.
Hey everybody, you can get your news from a lot of sources, but only Freedom Talk teaches you how to think like a patriot. We don't just tell you what's going on, we examine current events in the clarifying light of our founding principles, our history, literature, and Judeo-Christian values. You can watch Freedom Talk show on demand at realfreedomtalk.com. You can also search for Freedom Talk on your favorite podcast provider. We upload new episodes every Thursday and Friday. You can take a deeper dive with engaging articles that you can read or listen to at realfreedomtalk.substack.com. Now, I put a great deal of research and passion into these articles, and I think they'll resonate deeply with you. And of course, we'd love to interact with you on social media, so please take a moment to like, follow, and share Freedom Talk on Instagram, Twitter, Getter, and Rumble, all at Real Freedom Talk.
The idea of this two-tier justice system should be frightening because if they can go after Trump, then they can come after a congressman, they can come after a mayor. But you drill down to the local level is where you see parents being targeted who they go to a school board meeting and they're passionate because they're defending their child, and suddenly they're called domestic terrorists or they're labeled a criminal. But if that same person were to smash and grab the mall, suddenly the Justice Department looks the other way, right?
It's completely backward. And these are parents who have legitimate concerns. Like in our area, kids were committing suicide because of the COVID policies. We had one in our neighborhood commit suicide in the Arroyo near our house, and no kids were dying of COVID, and yet we were bringing these things to the school district, to the school board. They didn't care because they were getting money from the CDC. They ignored the parents. 16 or 17-year-old kid contacted me. He wanted to give a speech at a school board meeting there in Vail and say, my friend jumped off the bleachers and killed himself from this very gym we're meeting in. They shut down the meeting. He never got to say it. So that's another can of worms. But
well, I mean, and again, during COVID, I was very outspoken. I refused to comply. I kept our community open. And, in that process, was getting death threats. I was told that I was going to have blood on my hands, and, the woke media did hit pieces on me. There was a change.org petition to have me impeached, which we don't do that in Tennessee. But anyway, but I encouraged personal responsibility. You be you. You manage your own healthcare. And afterwards, I was right.
You were absolutely
You're right. Be smart. Social distance. Do all the things that you would do if there was. And I'm not going to compare. I'm not comparing COVID to the flu. I had a couple of good friends that died from COVID, but at the same token, there's certain precautions that you're going to take if there was a flu outbreak. If back in the day, if there was a measles, mumps, or chickenpox outbreak, like growing up, like there used to be, right? That being said, no apologies, right?
You shouldn't. You did the right thing,
right? But coming back at me, the media that vilified me and you and the others that said, "Oh, wait a second, I have a right to make my own decisions." And the thing I fell back to was, I was an elected official here in Tennessee. We had the authority to issue mask mandates and some of the closures and whatnot. And I simply looked at the state constitution and the Emergency Powers Act and the state law. And nowhere in either of those did I, as an elected official, have the authority to prescribe and force you to wear a medical device.
Yeah.
I can't make you take your diabetes medication. I can't make you go get cancer treatment. I can't make you wear an ankle brace. So why do I suddenly have the authority to make you wear a mask that had been elevated to the level of a medical device?
Right.
It was totally absurd. And the problem is, and again, I don't want to diminish COVID, but it had a 99% survival rate. So this idea of a state of emergency, that you have a pandemic, the standard now has been dropped so low that a toddler could step over it. And so when's the next crisis?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's the question. When are they going to manufacture the next crisis to suddenly, so they can steal an election, so they can use the ballots, so they can, look, if you have 1 million voters and you're printing 1.2, 1.3, not just printing, but mailing 1.2 or 1.3 million ballots, you're inviting fraud.
Yeah.
Right. This is not rocket science, folks. Right. I've got 10 people. I need 10 ballots. I got 1 million people. I need 1 million ballots. Right. And but they intentionally mail out more ballots than there are voters. And then they're surprised that there was fraud. I mean, this is ridiculous.
It really is. And you absolutely were right. I'm, among other things, a scientist. And at the time I was working as editor in chief for a national medical publication, a company based out of Seattle that does continuing education for doctors, dentists, physicians, that type of thing. So I saw all of this, knew this. We were getting data out of China before it even hit the news. And I knew right away the nature of this. We talked about mRNA technology prior to this going out to the public. And I knew that masks don't work. All the rest, I could go on and on about that. But you were right. From the medical standpoint, in our neighborhood in Tucson there, somebody was chaining up the swings in the kids' park. The kids needed to be outside getting fresh air.
That's right.
This was never a significant danger to them. So I just want to say thank you for what you did. And I hear from people here that you had the 2 weeks to stop the spread, and then life pretty much got back to normal in a sense. I'm sure people were wearing masks, but they had the freedom to do that or not.
Yeah, if you want to wear a mask today, fine. It's a free country. Go wear a mask. You wear a dress for all I care. You might look funny in it, but it's a free country. You be you. Yeah. But that means I'm going to be me. And if you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine.
So did you see an elevated death rate here in this county?
No, not at all.
I suspect it may have been better.
Well, in fact, so that first summer of COVID, I was frustrated with the level of panic from the government officials. And look, when it first jumped upon and it came here, we didn't know who it was going to impact. There was this concern. But if you go back and you look at the timeline, when it comes to mid to end of May, it was clear that there were specific demographics or cohorts that were going to be more negatively, catastrophically affected by COVID. That was the immunocompromised, and then the elderly, or, and there was, diabetes, being overweight, there was age factors. But again, we were able to identify who was at risk. And so that summer of COVID, when, everybody's panicking, county fairs are being closed and no concerts, I did both. We had our county fair because it was outdoor. And we spaced the rides and we encouraged people to keep a distance in line. And, there was enough hand sanitizer there that you could have taken a shower in it. What was interesting, you lead from the front. So I was there at the county fair every night with my family. And it was an interesting, kind of, from a scientific perspective, to watch how people moved. Is that family units and friend groups would be in these pods, if you will, moving through the crowd, and the various pods or family groups would social distance. But what that told you is that had there not been a county fair that night, that same friend or family group would have been in someone's home. Right. These people were there together because they have a bond and a relationship. Yes. And all we did was created an outdoor safe venue for them to be normal. We also had the concert right here on the square, just a block behind the courthouse here. Roughly 30,000 people showed up for an outdoor concert with Trace Atkins. It was a huge success. The next day we had a music festival with lots of local bands, and there was street vendors and crafts and all sorts of things. And again, the media from across the country talked about, there was just going to be mass death in Middle Tennessee, and I was a murderer. You know what happened? The Tennessee Department of Health, because there was no spike, because there was not increases in cases nor in deaths, actually had to come out and defend me and say, you know what, we've been monitoring southern Middle Tennessee, and the concert did not create any significant spike in COVID, but it was outside. People could social distance. And if you were at risk, then you could make the choice not to come. And I will say, going back to the county fair, you had all these folks setting up booths, and there was the veteran booth. And so I was mayor at the time, or county executive, and I walked by my veterans, and I appreciate them, thank them for being there. And in the back of the tent was this older gentleman. He had on a Korean War veteran hat, and he had oxygen. He was wearing oxygen. And I said, sir, I'm sorry, but should you really be here? That was the one time when, it's like, he was checking a lot of boxes, not a doctor, don't claim to be one. But that being said, he said, Mayor, he said, I've got about a year left, and I get to choose whether I spend that year with my friends or at home alone. And that put into perspective that moment of that man had a choice, and he made an educated choice to be out in public with his friends, because the alternative was for him to be locked up in his home and die alone. And he had the right to make that choice.
He sure did. I experienced a similar thing with a lady who obviously had some health issues. We had a coffee shop in Tucson at the time that became this haven for sanity and freedom. And I was talking to her outside the shop one day, and she had a black mask on. She took it off and threw it away. And she said, I don't know, I might lose my life, but I can't live like this anymore. And I thought, what a moment of dignity. And that is her choice. That is her choice. So kudos to you for standing up. Jeffrey Tucker from Brownstone Institute, he's also a contributor to the Epic Times. He wrote an article, the premise of which was basically a lot of people were hurt. Kids were deprived of education. Local businesses were driven into the ground. And he proposed sort of like reparations for all of that in the form of these people who experience these things should be exempt from taxes for a time. And he had some other ideas in there, but it brings to mind this question. The people who are hurt by this insanity, by this unconstitutional behavior, is there any recourse for them? Or we lost a business. We suffered ill effects. It definitely impacted my family, but we're kind of left with this feeling, Congressman, that that's just how it is. We won't see justice in this world. Do you have any perspective on that?
I think the powers that be feel that they were justified. It was a means to an end for them, and then we, the people, paid the price. We lost some of our dignity. We lost some of our freedom. Small business owners lost, in many cases, their businesses, and our children. You have an entire year and a half of education that was lost, and in most cases will never be regained. And the government is to blame for that. And when you fast forward to the current state of the economy and all the stimulus that was pumped into the economy, and look, you can make, I can play devil's advocate and argue both sides of the initial wave of COVID relief dollars. But there was a point at which it was clear that the economy was doing fine. It had the ability to recover on its own. We have a strong, healthy economy, middle class that could help us grow our economy and come back from the pandemic. But the government kept going and kept pushing. And, basic economics is if the government's putting more money into the economy, then the economy can produce on its own. So by way of a stimulus package or that type of thing, the backside of that is going to be inflation or inflationary pressures. I mean, it's a simple concept. And so when you look today at the inflation that we have and the fact that interest rates are skyrocketing and those that have been pursuing the American dream of home ownership are now priced out of the market, that those folks that would have qualified for, say, $300,000 can now only get a loan for $250,000, or that house payment because interest rates are now 7 to 8% instead of 3%. This is affecting people. Your commodities are higher now. And so your milk and your bread and the cost of fuel, everything has gone up. This is a result of a failed Biden administration. Bidenomics is that's fiction. There is no economic policy with this administration. They don't know what they're doing. Because if they had enough common sense to know what they were doing, you would have to assume that it's criminally intent to try to tank our economy. They're doing everything that they can do to try to bring America to its knees. And it pisses me off. I'll be honest with you. I went to the border. I saw with my own eyes. I photographed it. I took videos. They are intentionally allowing our country to be invaded. I mean, you have tens and hundreds of millions of dollars spent on this fence, and they're literally cutting part of it down. This is criminal. This is treasonous. Biden, Kamala, Mayorkas, they all should be impeached. They should be impeached today, and then they should be criminally charged. I mean, if you look at all these indictments of Trump over his questioning an election, which is his right to do that. Meanwhile, you have elected officials who are allowing our country to be invaded. They took an oath to serve and protect this country, and they have turned the other way. They have turned their backs on America. They have turned their backs on the Constitution. And we, the people, we're going to face that. There's going to be a reckoning in this country. And I liken the U.S. economy to the Titanic. It's a big ship, and it turns slowly. And we know there's a collision ahead. And if we don't correct course, that collision for this economy and our country is going to be catastrophic.
And you would know. I mean, you're on the financial committee. Am I saying that right?
Financial services. So
financial services. Yeah.
So that is, simply stated, the economy. So banks, the stock market, interest rates, the flow of money, both legal and illegal. And so anything to do with the economy as in terms of currency falls under financial services. And that's the committee I serve on. I'm on 4 subcommittees. I'm on financial institutions, which is the banking system. I'm on national security, which that speaks for itself, which is part of the reason why I went down to the border to see that illicit flow of goods and commodities and cash moving across our border. Oversight, and then ESG, where you have the government, the Biden administration, inserting woke policies, forcing credit card companies to say, hey, you're a gun store, we're no longer going to allow you to have a Visa account, or we're no longer going to allow you to bank with that institution. That's happening in China, and there's a push to try to make that happen here. And that kind of sounds conspiracy theorist until you realize that they're trying to implement it.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that, it kind of, again, I'm taking us off task a little bit with the central bank digital currency, is that if that were to be enacted, they then could literally regulate what you buy and don't buy. So they could say, the Ogles household, we drink a lot of milk. You go to the grocery store, if they have a central bank digital currency, and I scan my milk, they can say, well, Mr. Ogles, you've hit your quota for milk this month. You can't buy milk. Or maybe I was driving too fast on the interstate and they deduct points from my household, which they do in China. And so they penalize me and say, well, you drove too fast. We're not going to allow you to buy meat, or we're not going to allow you to buy milk, or you bought too much ammo 2 months ago, so we're going to penalize what you can buy. That's taking place in China. And there's a push to implement that here in the United States of America. So I have a piece of legislation that not only says no, but it says HELL no. The American dollar is the global currency. And the moment that we lose that, we are no longer sovereign. We are no longer superpower.
Are you concerned about the BRICS nations trying to supplant the dollar?
Well, I mean, I see on the near term being kind of a 2-year horizon, we are the global currency and will remain so. Geographically, we have two rather large bodies of water on either side. Our neighbors to our north and south do not pose a military threat, so there's not a risk of invasion. So geographically, we are the best place in the world to invest capital, currency. We have smooth and transitions of power. So even when you have a contested election like Trump-Biden, it still was a smooth transition of power. Then we have the largest middle class, our purchasing power. So all of those things combined protects the American dollar. But again, this administration seems to be doing everything they can to undermine our ability to be the world's currency.
Yeah, and I spent 2 full days on Capitol Hill, probably met with 30 or 40 congressmen, and, sort of off camera, I got the understanding that there's a lot of warfare going on there, a lot of battle. There's a sense from some people that the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated the DOJ, that some members of Congress have some relationships there that probably are inappropriate or worse. And I think we're in a war. I think we're in a 5th generation war, and it's a whole different kind of warfare. I'm good friends with Eli Crane, by the way. When I told him I'd be talking to you, he said, man, I like Andy. He had some good things to say about you. But I'm very impressed with some of you freshman congressmen who've come in. You bring a certain energy and no nonsense, get it done. I know a lot of the American people appreciate that. So thank you for what you're doing there. I wanted to ask you, getting back to lockdowns, mask mandates, there's talk, there are rumblings that these things could be brought back. Now, just this past weekend, I was down in Vegas for Clay Clark's Reawaken America tour. Donald Trump Jr. was there, General Flynn, a whole bunch of people. Roseanne was there. I got to meet Roseanne, which was pretty cool. But I remember at one point, thousands of people chanting, do not comply, do not comply. What do you think is going to happen if they try to push this again?
I'm cautiously optimistic that they're going to recognize that would be a mistake. That doesn't mean that they won't try it and maybe try to slowly move that direction to see how much pushback they get. But I think most Americans have had a taste of that and are not going back. Now, you do have some parts of the country that would openly embrace new COVID measures, but in the South, it didn't happen here to begin with, and it's sure as heck not going to happen here. The Jason Aldean video, which has made the courthouse famous, it ain't happening in a small town. It didn't happen before. It ain't happening again. And look, I'm just not going to comply. It didn't before. There's no reason for me to comply now. I chose to not be vaccinated. That's my choice. HIPAA, I don't have to disclose that if I don't want to, but I'm more than happy to disclose that. But I made a choice. I'm a reasonably healthy, reasonably fit adult male. I don't check the boxes of being at risk. And so natural immunity for me would be the best option. For me, social distancing, I have hand sanitizer in my pocket. I'm eating, shake a lot of hands. But what's interesting is during COVID, I never stopped. So we go back to the county fair conversation, the hundreds and hundreds of selfies with people from all over. I mean, we had people that drove from different states because our county fair that first summer was one of the only ones in the country that was open. Now think about that for a minute. This is America. I mean, the Iowa State Fair, county fairs, like that's Americana, right? And they were closed. And I was not going to let that go. I was not going to give that up. I was not going to take that away from our culture, our heritage, and our ability to say that's what we're going to do. And so literally selfie after selfie after selfie, I never got sick. Yeah. And maybe I have some weird immunity to it. Maybe I get sick tomorrow. I don't know. But
and you might have been asymptomatic.
Right.
But you can't run from a virus. It's going to run its course.
That's right.
And this hype about this new variant, viruses don't get more virulent because if they did, they'd burn out their host, they'd kill their host. We understand how viruses work, and just because this is a new one or a novel one doesn't mean it works different. But, one thing I was thinking about and talking about the other day is the founders of this country, when they were drafting the Declaration of Independence, when they were meeting, when they were birthing a new nation, they were facing smallpox, cholera, serious diseases that make COVID look like nothing, but they didn't hide. They met.
Yeah, they were huddled in hot air conditioned.
Yeah,
and so again, that's we've lost. We could have a whole separate conversation about our education system and how it's a failed social experiment. If by any metric that you were to apply to the education system, it would be a failure. There was a point in time where we needed kind of a mass ability to educate folks. Think of Appalachia, like where there were just no schools, no infrastructure. But that being said, now, I mean, when you have 30% of kids third grade, only 30% can read and do math at grade level. It's a failed institution. And if there was one agency that shuttered tomorrow, 100% shuttered, and you would see no impact across the country, it would be the Department of Education. Because if they closed today,
Amen.
You know what happened tomorrow? Kids would go to school. The buses would roll. The kids would have lunch. You know why? Because the states would step in and do their job. The state administers the education system already anyway. So we need to get the federal government out of education,
Amen.
Period.
Amen.
End of discussion.
Yeah, and now we have so many parents concerned. I interviewed Catalina Stube. She's the Hispanic outreach coordinator for Moms for Liberty, which I think is a great organization. Southern Poverty Law Center recently designated them as a hate group. Some moms who are concerned because this indoctrination is happening in schools. So many parents say, look, just teach the 3 R's, teach our kids what they want to know, but stop indoctrinating them, stop sharing your sexual choices with them, pushing those things on them. One concern that I have has been that parents have been targeted, vilified, literally called domestic terrorists because they stand up and oppose these things. I'm one of them. Shame on you, Vail School District, by the way, for how you treated me and my family. I've experienced this. I know a mother who had the audacity to question the quarantining of her daughter who wasn't sick. And the school principal and the magistrate took her to court, put her into prison for 5 days. A school mom who's children's book author, her family's still trying to recover from that. They arrested and handcuffed her husband, and the 16-year-old daughter, handcuffed her and put her in a police car. What country are we living in here? How do we handle this? How do we help those parents? And I know Catalina, a wonderful immigrant from Colombia, she has gotten death threats. She's courageous. Most of these people are. Riley Gaines from here in Tennessee, not on the school front, but on the athletics front. We've gotten to talk to her, got to have breakfast with her. Wonderful, wonderful gal. Mm-hmm. One of the things we're trying to do with Freedom Talk is really help people understand, not make fun of them, not talk about liberal tears, all of those things, but help people try to understand what's happening, the ideologies that they're buying into. How do we overcome this? How do we get back to being the United States of America? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is the education system. I mean, you've got to understand you've got a media that's culpable and buying into this nonsense of, more than two genders. Look, if a volcano erupted and we were all covered in ash sitting here, 100 years from now, when they're excavating the Murray County courthouse area, you know what they're going to find? Two genders. That's it. It's science. And so this idea that we're now having conversations, that you're having school districts that are allowing kids to transition without parental consent, that's child abuse.
I couldn't agree more.
And you literally, and this is not hyperbole, I'm not exaggerating, but there are books in elementary and middle schools in the libraries that if I were to have my child check one of those out, bring it home to me, then I stood on the sidewalk and read it aloud in front of the playground, I would be arrested for exposing children to sexually explicit material. But if I'm inside the school as a librarian doing it, it's okay.
Yeah.
And so this is that, again, the idea of this two-tiered justice system. We have two standards, and the audacity for some for the system to think that because someone is a librarian that they know what's best for my child is offensive.
And then doing this behind parents' backs.
That's right. And so to answer your question, though, I am cautiously optimistic that we will hold the House in 24. I do believe firmly that we will win the Senate in 24. And I think we're going to win the White House in 24. And when that happens, I will be one of the many loud voices pushing to gut the Department of Education at the federal level and to hold these bureaucrats accountable. And so if you are a secretary or a deputy secretary and you swore an oath to do a job, but instead of doing that job, you're pushing some woke agenda that undermine the United States of America, you should probably go ahead and resign, because we are coming and we are going to correct course, and we are going to hold these people accountable, because I'm pissed off and I'm fed up. That's the simple truth of it.
And as
I want my country back.
Yeah, as a representative of the people, I would say a majority are right there with you, feeling the same. Parents, I've talked to many of them. John Amanchukwu, I don't know if you've met him. He's a pastor, black pastor. He's right over in North Carolina. There's this great viral video where he stands up at a school board meeting, and he's got that great Southern Baptist feel to his rhetoric, and he's reading one of these books, and he's not holding back. And one of the school board members starts interrupting him, getting very uncomfortable, and he says, "What? You can read this to the kids, but I can't read this here. You can't handle it." It's a great video. He's been on this show a couple of times. I asked him to co-host a seminar. I know you're a father, called Fathering in a World Gone Mad. Victor Marks is going to be a part of that. Eric Metaxas, Sheriff Mark Lamb.
Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Eric Metaxas.
Yes.
If you can keep it, he wrote a book. I would highly recommend anyone and everyone reading that, but it takes us through the founding of our country. It's simple. It's an easy read. It's a simple read. And actually I was at an event. He was there, I got to have dinner with him, and he signed a copy
Fantastic.
of that book for me, which is one of my prized treasures, because I appreciate the perspective and the time he took to educate even some of the more nominal figures in the Revolutionary War, but the impact that they had in setting up and founding our nation. And we're losing that. That goes back to the conversation of the education system and the fact that people have forgotten that we are a republic of free states. They have forgotten that they have the right. You're free. Our founding fathers fought for that. They died for that. And like you said, they were facing illness and death at the time that they were literally convening and writing the Constitution and fervently debating the Constitution. Yeah. And here we are. And we are, I think our founding fathers would be appalled and gravely disappointed in the America that we have become.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, the fourth one was General Mike Flynn, which is fantastic. I mean, what a great lineup to give advice to fathers. But you're absolutely right. And Eric Metaxas also wrote Letter to the American Church, which is a great book. And you sense this frustration that we're seeing history repeat itself. He talks a lot about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I think he refers to Sophie Scholl and the White Rose Resistance. But how they saw what was coming, and they stood up to it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer actually participated in a plot to assassinate Hitler, and he believed that was justifiable under Christianity, that he was trying to prevent a lot of murders. And there was this frustration because out of 12,000 churches, 3,000 opposed the Nazi regime, 3,000 went along with them. But in the middle, there were just go along to get along, and I think that's one of the biggest problems right now. How do we wake people up?
Yeah.
How do we say, look, this is serious? Because I see people going about their lives. They have their gardens, they watch their TV shows, they do their thing. And there's this sense of, like you say, conspiracy theory. Oh, no, this can't really happen. It's the big lie principle. Do you see Americans waking up? People talk about the Great Awakening.
Well, a side note, Metaxas also has a great book on Bonhoeffer. However, that is a very thick book. It's a more challenging read, still worth reading. But no, that's a whole conversation on the role of the church. And quite frankly, I would say the failure of the church. We've had some of these big conversations on some of these social issues. And like you said, you had some of the churches were over here fighting, the persecution. Some went along with it, and then the vast majority were kind of in the middle, afraid to take a position. And you've seen that manifest or play out with a lot of these social issues where the church has been silent. The transitioning of children, where's the church? Where's the church?
Some of them are going along with it. They're flying pride flags and getting behind transgenderism. Some of them go so far as what I think many would consider blasphemy, saying things like God is queer.
That it's absurd, and so again, when you look at the state of religion in this country and why you kind of see this kind of religious drift, I think it is in part because many of our churches have lost their way and need to get back to the founding word, not some woke author's opinion, but what does the word say? And understand that, Jesus in his time was controversial. He said things that were very pointed, but he did it in a loving way. And so we can criticize behavior, hate the sin, not the sinner. And we've got to get back to that. And so this idea that, look, you have a right to be you. We can have a conversation about sin, but I can still love you as a brother. And I'm not saying you, but you in the broader sense, right? And then this idea that because someone else is a sinner, then we should allow that person to target children with their sin. Protect the least of these.
Right.
You should have a millstone around your neck. Yeah. This is not gray area. And so where is the church? Yeah. The church should be protecting the least of these. You look at, especially in the South, there's a church every half mile on a corner. The church should be the centers of saying enough is enough on this culture war. Children are sacrosanct, right? We have an open door policy. You come in, we're going to love on you. But children are sacred. It says so in the Bible.
Yeah.
Where is the church? It's disappointing.
Sometimes people focus on the lamb aspect of Jesus and neglect the lion. Of course, he formed a whip, overturned the money changers' tables. He didn't hold back on the religious, pompous religious people of his time, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, called them a den of vipers. There's some interesting passages like where he was surrounded and they wanted to kill him. It wasn't his time yet, so he went out from the midst of them. I have to imagine, like did some rugby type moves, crashing through. It's hard to know, but I think the point is we do love people when they're victims of these ideologies, because there are a lot of confused people. I know Chloe Cole, detransitioner, wonderful young gal. She's going around the country speaking. She doesn't get any support for detransitioning. She gets a lot of hate. She's almost seen as a traitor to that cause. But I think there does come a point where you have to stand up strong to sin. And I think that's, you hear about the mama bears, and they're wonderful. Carrie Lake talks about the mama bears a lot. We need papa bears. That's one of the things that we want to support is fathers coming in and being that wall, being masculine and saying, you shall not pass. You're not going to get to our kids. Yeah. Because there does come a point. Christians can't be wimpy. We have to stand for something. And I like to say, it's not so much about what we oppose or what we hate. It's about what we love. We consider our children, their innocence, we consider it sacred. We consider sexuality between a man and a woman to be sacred. And it's interesting to me, and I'm sorry I'm monologuing a little bit here, but
that's fine.
I've talked to some of the Gays Against Groomers. I think if you're not against us, you're for us. I applaud their efforts. But it's interesting because they have a line. So they accept homosexuality, but they say, okay, sex with children, pedophilia, that crosses the line. We're going to stand up to that. Right. And it's not too far of a stretch to say, well, people who believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman, we have our line too. And it doesn't mean we hate you for your understanding or your choices. It just means that we love something and we consider it sacred.
Well, when it comes to our children being sacred, and this idea that a minor child can make that type of decision that has long-term implications. I mean, I think most 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old children, they want to be a doctor, an astronaut, and a fireman. And they want to be those things, not fully understanding that the implications that there's a path to becoming a fireman, and there's a path to becoming a doctor. There's a path to becoming, a carpenter. They don't fully understand the gravity of that life choice. If they don't understand that, how in the heck are they going to understand the implications of taking some sort of puberty blocker, or for heaven forbid, having a surgery? And again, it's just ludicrous. I kind of go back to, our own experience. We have a daughter and two boys. Our daughter's the oldest, and this would have been several years ago, but her birthday is before our littlest, and she had like a colored themed birthday party. It was pink, right? So everything was pink and princessy. She's a little girl. I mean, that's what she wanted, and that's what we did. A couple of months later, our littlest, it's his turn to have a birthday, and he wants to have a purple birthday. And I said, well, son, that's a girl color. Pick another one. He's like, oh, okay, Dad, I'm green. I like the Hulk, right? But there was that moment of I stepped in as a father to say that color is something that Adley, our daughter, might choose. You need to pick a boy color because he's a boy. Let me be clear. A boy's a boy. And you know what? He wasn't scarred. He had a really cool Hulk birthday. It's one of the epic birthday parties he's had, But as a father, I guided him in that moment when he needed his compass needed orientating, right? And it wasn't that it was done in a hateful way. Just like, pick another color. We have all these colors to choose from. And so again, the idea that in that moment, I would have been like, oh, do you want to wear a dress too? Or do you want to? That's absurd. And
this isn't completely subjective. There's a psychology to color. We know this when we're doing branding, but
that's right.
You can see a color wheel, and you can see the different brands and what colors they use. It's very purposeful. And I think what's really important is you recognize that your son needs to develop certain qualities. He needs to have strength and fortitude and courage. You're going to need those things in life. So I think what you're doing was very loving. You're being a good parent, not a bad parent. And this leftist neo-Marxist doctrine is pretty much let the child lead the way. Well, they're a tabula rasa. They need that guidance. I mean, as a parent, a lot of the schools, unfortunately, are looking at us as somebody who just feeds and provides for the kids, but the schools really know what's good for them. So
the same school that is ineffective at teaching reading, the same school system that can't teach math is suddenly going to parent my child? Oh, heck no. That's why, life choice, our children go to a private Christian school because we don't want them to be indoctrinated by this filth that's really invaded our schools. But that's a decision that we make, and we're blessed to be able to provide that. Many aren't, and I would say many children are victimized because of or failed by this education system because they don't go into the world equipped. I mean, think about it. If you exit high school, whether you complete or not, but you exit high school, let's assume for a moment you have a diploma, but you can't read and write on grade level. Even if you want to go down to the Chick-fil-A or that fast food restaurant and fill out that application, if you're not doing math or if you can't write at grade level, you're already set up for failure. So when you look in some of these communities and the streets have run amok, I mean, even just within the last 2 weeks, Washington, D.C., because it's become so violent and that you have these gangs of kids, some of them 12, 13 years old, carjacking folks. They've had to implement a curfew where kids can't be out at night, one for their own safety, but also because of the children that are going out at night, and robbing and doing all these horrible things in our nation's capital, which is, again, why I have a piece of legislation. A lot of people don't realize this, but the Washington, D.C., if Congress chooses, is under the rule of Congress. A few decades ago, we allowed them to have home rule, which means Congress voted to allow them to elect a city council and to elect a mayor. But I have a piece of legislation that strips them of that authority because the city, I mean, you can't hardly walk at night if you're a female, heaven forbid, in the city of our nation's capital because it's no longer safe. And you go to some of our monuments, our treasured, it's kind of the front porch of America, and they're in ill repair. I mean, this is not acceptable. The rats are running the streets, and I'm not talking about liberal activists. I'm talking about actual rats that are just literally in the middle of the day. You have rats running, crisscrossing the street because it's filthy. The trash is everywhere. And I've had enough. I've had enough with this wokeism. I've had enough of seeing the nation's capital being run into the ground. And that's why I say I think 24, we're going to see a huge political shift. And I would caution that we as conservatives, Republican Party, that's the moniker that we have, is we better do our job. Like we have a moment. We have a 2-year cycle where we'll have the House, the Senate, and the White House, and we better get in there and do our job. The American people need it. Mm-hmm. They will require it. And if we don't, there'll be another pendulum shift, and then we'll be right back where we are today.
Yeah, we're tired of politics as usual. We're tired of people who talk but don't walk it out. And gosh, there's so much to say about everything you were just discussing. The attack on men, on manhood, on fathers, this whole ridiculous notion of toxic masculinity. They set up a straw man and take all the most negative aspects, but completely ignore the positive aspects of manhood. But honestly, statistically, I know a lot of this crime among youth, teen pregnancies, a lot of these problems, they go directly back to the absence of fathers in the community. And, we were talking about some biblical themes, turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers. Like I said, you're a father. I'm a father. I'm a father of 5. I want to ask this. How do we restore fatherhood? And particularly in some of the communities where the father is not very present. We just talked to Stephen Davis, Maga Hulk, Siaka Masakoi. I have a show with Nick Natoli, all of them Black Americans, and each one of them has talked about the absence of the family, of the father in the family.
It's tough. I mean, unfortunately, I fear that we've kind of hit that tipping point where we may not be able to come back from it. But again, this gets back to, I think largely the church has to stand up and defend the family unit. We need to get the federal government out of education so that they're just teaching. Currently, even, today in many schools, the idea of the family unit is kind of, it's not talked about because they don't want to be offensive or whatever. And we need men to stand up, quite frankly. And so there's, I don't know that there's one simple answer, but I would say it starts with the individual. Of course, if you're looking for institutions to solve your problems, you're missing the mark. You have to be accountable for your own decisions. We need to encourage as men to encourage other men to stand up and to be true to the obligations they've made to their family. But that's also where the church can be that center of this is what America needs to look like going forward. Let's recast the vision of America, which simply is looking in the rearview mirror and knowing where we came from and how this country was founded, and the fabric of society, the strength of it was the family unit. And getting back to that, it is worrisome. But that's why, I do my part. We're, this masculine toxic masculinity, whatever you say. I had a Christmas card that went viral. We live in the South. I grew up, my grandparents had a farm, we shoot guns, my son got a rifle for Christmas a couple of years ago. And some liberals would think that I was just, Satan incarnate because of this Christmas card. But, I got news for you. This weekend I'm taking my son and daughter dove hunting. They want to go. Now my son will actually, be hunting with me. I don't think my daughter will, but she wants to go with us. She wants to be a part of the family, and it's something that we're going to do together. And I'm not forcing it on them, but, God bless America, and quite frankly, it was rednecks with guns, patriots who founded this country.
So true.
That's getting us off track. But, I'm a fervent believer in our Constitution and our republic and what our founders believed in. And they weren't perfect men, but they understood and valued the family, and that we have a country that's based on Judeo-Christian values and construct. And if it's not explicitly stated in the Constitution or law, it's based off of, centuries of common law out of Britain. And it's all based and centered around Judeo-Christian principles. And again, we have an administration that's doing everything they can to take that away from the American psyche.
Yeah.
because that I believe that they are intentionally trying to undermine the family unit.
Yeah. We speak the same language. You talk about common law going back hundreds of years. There's a great book called Inventing Freedom by Daniel Hannan. You might be familiar with that.
So check it out.
It's great. He's an excellent speaker too, but he does talk about the heritage of freedom in the Anglosphere. Not any particular race, but just the English-speaking world that goes back to Magna Carta in, what was it, 1250? And the the Revolutionary War at first was called the Second English Civil War, because the founders knew that they had a law that was for the people, that was there to protect the people, and the crown was breaking it. So we still have that heritage. We still have that law. And I always say we respect rule of law, but not rule by law, because the law is mainly supposed to keep the powers in check so that we don't have the kind of tyranny we're getting into now. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I have an appointment. I know you have work to do, but I wanted to ask you a question. Is America dead? Is the Republic dead?
No, but I do think that we're at a pivotal point in history. When you look through, our country and look through history, you can almost put, if our nation's history is a timeline, you can put a thumbtack in those moments in history where the American people made a decision, and that decision changed the course of America, and it led to that next moment in time. And we're going to look back at this, 2 to 4 year period of being one of those thumbtack moments where it's a pivotal moment in history where we as American people have to decide. It's kind of Robert Frost. We have two roads that are about to diverge, and we're going to have to choose which path we're going to take. And I think one of those paths leads to destruction, and the other path, probably the road less taken, may be a more challenging road. But it's going to take fearless leaders to take us down that path, to get us back to the founding of our country, to defend the family, to be willing to be attacked for just saying what we all know to be true. A lot of this conversation that we've just had is not only biblical, but it's common sense. And,
Truly is.
And so, but now if you try to speak truth, both rational truth and biblical truth, you're villainized and you're attacked, and they try to destroy you. I mean, I've seen it here even where I am outspoken. So they've done everything they can to try to destroy my character. And at the end of the day, I'm just going to continue to be me. Yeah. And I'm not going to feign from the attacks. I'm going to stand strong. I'm going to stand firm. And at the end of the day, if doing the right thing gets me unelected, I'm okay with that. I ran for this job to fight for my country, to fight for my family, to save the republic, and I'm not going to back down from that mission.
Well, pardon my language, but I'm damn glad you did. And, the fact that you're serving indicates to me, and just having this time with you, which is, I appreciate greatly, it indicates to me that you have hope for this country.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you for everything you do.
Just keep in mind, the obstacles we face today, and I know we need to close out, but think about your founding fathers. They were fighting an empire. They were outmanned, they were outgunned, they were outfinanced, and they fought a revolutionary war. They fought for a future, and it was built on hope. And never give up hope.
Never give up hope. And for everybody out there who's fighting, we're going to hopefully soon do a segment of the show or a series called Unsung, about the unsung heroes out there, because there are a lot of people like me who got attacked by our government. We were woken up, but I think our lives would have been very different if we had lived here, but maybe it wouldn't have lit the fuse. I'm going to fight to the death for this country. I know there are a lot of people out there who are doing that. So you're not alone. Sometimes it feels like there's just a thin line of patriots holding back the chaos. I appreciate what you do. I know a lot of people appreciate that, but you're not alone. There's a lot of us out here in the trenches, and I just want to thank you so much for what you stand for and what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with Freedom Talk. All right.